Hey guys, tonight we journey through the twisting candlelit corridors of medieval beauty, where powdered faces hide secrets, mirrors whisper sins, and vanity is a deadly flirtation. Picture yourself trudging barefoot along a muddy monastery path at dusk. The cold bites your ankles. You catch a whiff of rosemary and sheep dung, and just ahead, a nun leans over a wooden basin, gently patting her skin with chilled rose water. Her face is pale, so pale she almost glows. A few peasant girls peek through the hedges, their cheeks sun-warmed, streaked with dust and grit. One of them whispers, "She's closer to heaven, that one." Welcome to a world where your skin tone can determine your moral standing, your social status, and possibly whether or not you're accused of witchcraft. You probably won't survive this, but hey, at least you'll die historically accurate. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you watching from, and what time is it in your corner of the world? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk past rows of cabbage and onions. Beyond the garden wall, a convent hums with soft psalms and the shuffle of linen habits. Here in the medieval countryside, beauty isn't just a matter of looks, it's a spiritual virtue, a political tool, and a survival mechanism. The nun you just saw? She's part of a holy order that believes pale skin reflects divine chastity. The paler, the purer. The less sun, the more soul. You crouch near a well, watching as the village herbalist mashes up crushed lily petals and sheep fat in a mortar. She dabs some onto her own cheeks, muttering about aristocratic dewiness. It smells not great. But she swears it'll give you that blessed complexion, minus the leprosy. This is where it begins, the chase for that ghostly glow. Forget bronzer, sun-touched skin is for people who labor, toil, or worse, travel. In medieval Europe, particularly the 13th through 15th centuries, alabaster white skin was the gold standard of female beauty. It wasn't just aesthetics, it was an entire class system written across your forehead. You see a girl with ruddy cheeks? She's probably worked outdoors. A woman with pearly skin? She's been shielded, fed, maybe even literate. Historians still argue whether this preference stemmed more from religious imagery, angels and saints often depicted as pale, or from health status, since fair skin could suggest good nutrition and a disease-free life. Either way, you're beginning to realize that beauty here is as much about illusion as it is about truth. But don't be fooled, maintaining that illusion wasn't easy. You've got to stay out of the sun, sure, but also scrub your face with vinegar, apply concoctions of white lead and egg whites, and pray your pores don't rebel. Some nuns used crushed pearls, others, horrifyingly, used mercury. One recipe included boiled animal marrow mixed with milk. Soft as a lamb's bottom, they promised. You're tempted to gag. And it wasn't just women. There's a man nearby rubbing chalk on his chin and carefully trimming his beard to a tight, wholly pointed angle. He catches you staring and shrugs. To be virtuous is to appear virtuous. He smells like onions and piety. As you move through the village, you spot an artist working on a stained glass panel. The Virgin Mary his painting is practically translucent. Too dark and the bishop sends it back, he mutters. Even in religious iconography, pale skin is divine. The whiter the saint, the closer to heaven. The irony? These depictions were often done in dusty, soot-covered towns, where nobody actually looked that ethereal. Meanwhile, peasants like you? You're using what you've got. Mud packs to cool the blood, mashed berries for color correction, and holy water mixed with barley to bless the blemishes away. You once heard of a woman who swore bathing in goat's milk cured her of freckles. She also claimed the goat spoke Latin. One merchant even peddles a beauty vial that includes crocodile dung imported from Egypt. It's said to cure warts, wrinkles, and jealousy. You eye it skeptically. He winks. Smells worse than sin, works better than prayer. Beneath it all simmers a strange contradiction, purity and temptation tangled together like unbrushed curls. You're supposed to look untouched by worldly hardships, but also beautiful enough to attract a suitor or a patron or a heavenly vision. And that balancing act? It's exhausting. Even the saints probably needed concealer. Just before night falls, you wander to the edge of a nearby abbey garden. A young nun is cutting chamomile under the fading gold light. She catches your eye and smiles, barely. Her skin glows like candle wax, and for a moment, you wonder if she's part ghost. She gestures to the flowers and says softly, "For the wash basin." Makes the skin less tired. You want to ask her if she ever wishes she could run barefoot through the field without worrying about freckles, or dust, or the judgment of bishops. But you don't. Instead, you pick a petal and tuck it behind your ear. Behind you, a priest preaches against vanity. He says those who paint their faces are painting lies. And yet, that evening, you spot him gently patting rose oil beneath his eyes when he thinks no one's watching. You return to your hut under moonlight, your feet aching and your mind buzzing. You press a damp cloth to your face, wondering if it will make you look more pure by morning. Probably not. But in this world, it's worth a try. You wake to the sound of bells tolling across the hills, soft and muffled by the morning fog. The fire's gone out, and your breath clouds in the chill air. You reach up, instinctively, and brush your hand across your forehead. It's bare. Not just of sweat, but of hair. That's right. Today, you're noble. Or at least, pretending to be. And in this world, that means your hairline starts somewhere near the top of your skull. Hair, in medieval times, is not just hair. It's scandal, it's status, it's spirituality wrapped in keratin. And it's definitely not supposed to be visible. Especially if you're a woman. Out in the courtyard, a young lady sits by a window, flanked by two maids. One is plucking her hairline clean with a pair of tweezers so tiny they look like torture instruments. The other braids what remains of her hair into a tight coil at the nape of her neck. She winces with each pluck but keeps her chin up, literally. High foreheads are all the rage right now. The higher, the holier. They say it makes you look more intelligent, more divine. Or at least, less like you have thoughts not sanctioned by the church. The ideal is smooth, uninterrupted space from eyebrows to crown. Forget bangs. Bangs are for sinners. You shuffle past and catch a glimpse of yourself in a puddle. Your forehead? Average. Your hair? Messy, thick, and completely UN-plucked. A liability. Back inside a manor house, you find a group of ladies debating head coverings. Wimples, veils, linen wraps, take your pick. Married women must cover their hair by law in many towns. Unmarried girls might wear theirs in long, flowing locks, but only if they're virgins. And you? Better make a choice fast. There's a monk walking by who looks judgmental enough to get you excommunicated for a stray curl. Hair is sacred. Hair is dangerous. Loose hair suggests loose morals. Which is why, for many women, it gets hidden, braided, twisted, or outright removed. Historians still argue whether these styles were more influenced by religious modesty or simply by a lack of access to proper shampoo. Probably both. Men, on the other hand, have more freedom but not much sense. One nobleman, Sir Thibaut of who knows where, has curled his shoulder-length locks with hot tongs and dabbed them with rose oil. You can smell him from the archway. He tosses his manet and grins. Ladies love the nightly curl, he declares, before tripping over a chicken. A monk nearby shakes his tonsured head in disapproval. Yes, the famous monk haircut. Bald patch in the middle, ring of fuzz on the outside. The corona tonsura, symbolic of humility and imitation of Christ's crown of thorns. You wouldn't wear it by choice, but if you're in the monastery, say goodbye to vanity. And to hats. Not all styles are chosen. In a nearby village, you find a girl whose hair is streaked with ash and tied back with rough twine. She's a widow, barely 20, and she's shaved the sides of her head in mourning. It's not trendy. It's tradition. Meanwhile, back in the city, another girl rubs vinegar and crushed herbs into her scalp, trying to keep lice at bay. She's heard of a noble remedy, rosemary and lavender steeped in wine, but can't afford the ingredients. Instead, she uses mint and hope. At a fair, a merchant is hawking ribbons and combs carved from bone. He swears his combs detangle sin from virtue. A child next to you is wearing a braided crown of daisies and goat dung. It's a look. There's a painting being unveiled nearby. A noble woman with an impossibly long neck and an even more impossible forehead stares blankly at the viewer. Her hair is drawn back so tightly you wonder if it hurts. Her veil is so sheer it might as well be suggestion. Her eyebrows? Non-existent. Perfection, someone whispers. But perfection is fleeting. Wigs made of human hair are passed around among those who can afford them. Dyed blonde or even pale green with lye, they're styled high to match the fashion of the hour. And yes, you heard that right, green hair. Not because they wanted it. Because the dye went sideways. One fringe tidbit you overhear, in some Italian city-states, blonde hair was so prized, women would sit in the sun with their hair spread across wide-brimmed hats, strands soaking in lemon juice, praying for highlights. Some say it worked. Some say it just made their head smell like citrusy regret. A friar gives a sermon on the vanity of locks. He declares that Satan hides in a woman's hair, whispering temptation. Someone coughs. Someone else pulls their veil a little tighter. And you find yourself wondering what your hair says about you. Are you virtuous? Vain? Unkempt? Or just really tired of goat butter conditioner? By nightfall, you sit by a stream, trying to wash away the dust of the day. The moonlight catches the ripple of your reflection. You push your hair back, just a little. Not too far. You never know who's watching. The rooster's crow isn't what wakes you this time. It's the distant grind of a mortar and pestle, rhythmic and impatient. You follow the sound through winding alleys and thatched fences, until you come upon a cottage window dusted with steam. Inside, a woman, middle-aged, gap-toothed, and humming, leans over a bowl of grey powder, grinding sage, ash, and a hint of what might be salt. For your teeth, she says, without looking up. Not perfect, but cleaner than chewing birch bark. You raise an eyebrow. So do her 3 remaining front teeth. Yes, friend. Tonight, you're diving deep into the mysterious world of medieval dental beauty, which is to say, a place where smiles matter, but toothpaste is terrifying. You take a seat by her hearth. She hands you a twig. Try it, she says. Chew the end till it frays. You do. It tastes like the forest had second thoughts. But hey, you're brushing medieval style. Congratulations. In this time, white, even teeth aren't expected, not exactly. They're admired, yes. But hardly common. Tooth loss was frequent, and cavities were a slow-burning inevitability. Yet somehow, having a presentable smile still counted toward your beauty standing, especially among the well-to-do. Peasant teeth? Often brown from wine or bread ash. Noble teeth? Slightly less brown, possibly hidden behind a lace handkerchief if things got dire. Historians still argue whether medieval people actively sought white teeth as an aesthetic choice or if cleanliness and health just happened to overlap. But either way, the options were experimental. You lean over as the woman sprinkles crushed sage onto her own finger and rubs it across her gums with enthusiasm bordering on violent. You learn of another method later that day, crushed coral mixed with mint oil, if you're lucky enough to own either. Or powdered deer antler. Or, brace yourself, burnt bread. Yes. Charcoal. Smiling blackened teeth as a mark of cleanliness. Think about that next time you see a medieval portrait with lips gently closed. And speaking of lips, you notice something else while trading turnips for gossip in the square. A merchant's daughter keeps her mouth ever so slightly puckered, barely showing her teeth. It's deliberate. Open-mouth grinning? Considered crude. Reserved for drunkards, fools, or those blessed with exactly zero social awareness. Even religious figures were finicky about it. A silent mouth reveals a quiet soul, one friar announces at a gathering. But a laughing woman shows too many teeth and too little shame. Harsh? Sure. But not uncommon. You wander into a scribe's studio where a young monk is copying illuminated manuscripts. He's sketching a saint with an oddly smug grin. Are teeth supposed to show, you ask? He blinks. Only if you want her to look French. Wait, what? Turns out, medieval stereotypes weren't just cultural, they were dental. French courtiers were often mocked for flamboyant smiles. Meanwhile, English nobility favored modest, closed-lip expressions. A smile, then, wasn't just about joy, it was a social strategy. Later, at a noble feast, you notice the lord of the manor sipping clove wine. He smiles, a tight-lipped, mysterious thing, and his teeth flash white. Or whitish. One servant leans in and whispers, boiled oak bark. Twice daily. Makes em shine. You grimace. That sounds like something you'd use to tan leather, not your molars. Still, there's some charm to it. People try, you know? There's even a recipe floating around, mix powdered sage, mint, and crushed salt into vinegar, let it sit under the moon for 3 nights, and then apply it with a piece of linen. If your teeth survive, maybe your soul will too. One fringe tidbit that catches your ear: a few folk healers believe that if you recite the Pater Noster backwards while brushing with fennel, your teeth will remain in your head until death. You make a mental note not to try that. Backwards prayers are, well, frowned upon. Possibly possession adjacent. You return to the village and find children chewing licorice root. Not for fun, for dental health. It keeps the breath sweet and the gums tough. And it's cheaper than paying a barber surgeon to yank a tooth out with iron tongs. Oh right. Barber surgeons. They're not just for bloodletting and bad haircuts. They're the de facto dentists of the age. If your tooth hurts, you sit on a stool, get drunk on ale, and brace for impact. No anesthesia. Just a rag to bite down on and a bowl for the collection. But even after all that, beauty remains in the balance. You spot a tapestry in the church showing a noble woman with dainty fingers pressed over her lips, smiling just enough to suggest purity, not seduction. Her teeth are invisible, of course. Perfect teeth weren't meant to be flaunted, they were just meant to be assumed. At night, by candlelight, you rub your own teeth with a clean cloth dipped in ash water. It tastes like regret. But there's something comforting in the ritual. Tomorrow, maybe, someone will notice. Or maybe not. But you'll know. And in a world without floss, that's already a win. You wake before dawn this time, not because of any noise, but because your face itches. Your cheeks feel dry and stretched, like someone tried to tan your skin with a fireplace. You shuffle over to a cracked mirror, a polished tin plate, and flinch. You look like a ghost who just lost a bar fight. But then you remember, that's the goal. In the glowing coals of the hearth, you spot last night's concoction, the lead-based whitening cream you swiped from that overconfident apothecary. Still smells like regret and spoiled goat milk. But you dab a little more on, because in the medieval world, dangerously pale skin isn't just fashionable, it's practically divine. The obsession with pallor reaches new levels of absurdity this century. Pale skin means you don't labor. It means you live in shadows, under roofs, with servants who fetch things and maybe even read aloud when your eyes get tired. It's soft power, smeared across your face like war paint for the socially ambitious. You pass a manor garden later that morning and spot Lady Idelva, reclining on a carved stone bench beneath a silk parasol, sipping goat's milk and nibbling cucumber slices like a lizard with a title. Her face? White as chalk. Her neck? Draped in pale lavender silk. She doesn't speak. She simply stares, regally, through the veil of her perfection. You overhear her maid whispering about the good face cream, one with white lead, vinegar, and crushed pearl. It keeps the skin cool and blemish-free. Never mind that it seeps into your bloodstream and slowly poisons you over time. Worth it? Probably. Historians still argue whether women fully understood the toxicity of these beauty products, or if the long-term effects were blamed on other causes, like curses, bad air, or sinful thoughts. Lead, mercury, and arsenic all appear in beauty recipes, but often under softer names, ceruse, spirit of Saturn, or the incredibly inviting angel snow. Angel snow. Sounds like something that would make you fly. Straight to the afterlife. At the village market, you watch a crowd gather around a traveling vendor. He's selling a complexion water that promises to remove freckles, sunspots, and visible pores. The ingredients? Donkey's milk, mashed lily root, and something he calls fairy tears. You're 99% sure it's vinegar. You catch a glimpse of his assistant, a young woman with a scarf wrapped tightly over her head, leaving only her unnaturally white face visible. You wonder if it's makeup, or if she's simply been kept in a cupboard for the last 5 years. One fringe story you hear in the tavern that night, a noblewoman once sat indoors for 4 months straight, avoiding the sun entirely, just to achieve the perfect bridal complexion. They say she turned so pale that when she finally walked into church, someone screamed and threw holy water at her. Meanwhile, peasants have their own tricks. A girl your age crushes elderflower into paste and rubs it on her cheeks. It doesn't bleach her skin, but it calms the redness from all that sun. She looks at you and shrugs. I'm not trying to be a ghost. Just want to look less boiled. Sun damage, in this world, isn't called that. It's called moral suspicion. If your skin is golden or ruddy, you must be one of those women. The kind who harvests barley without permission. Or, God forbid, dances barefoot. The church, predictably, has opinions. Preachers rant about vanity, calling it the devil's compact mirror. Yet even they seem to prefer their saints alabaster and glowing. The contradiction doesn't escape you. And don't think this is a women-only game. You catch a nobleman at dusk applying egg-white paste to his face with a feather brush. He thinks no one's looking. His cheeks shine like eggshells. You pretend not to notice. There's also the matter of face fasting. Some religious orders, especially among women, practiced abstaining from all beauty products during Lent or periods of mourning. But once the fast was over, The jars came out faster than you could say divine contradiction. You're starting to understand that beauty here is less about attraction and more about message. Your face is a scroll people read. Pale? You're rich. Tanned? You're expendable. Glowing, porcelain, and slightly unwell looking? Congratulations. You're doing it right. As evening falls, you sit near the river and try one of the gentler home remedies, cool milk and chamomile. It feels better than lead, at least. You watch your reflection blur in the rippling surface. You look less terrifying now. Just tired. A girl nearby whispers that if you wash your face in dew before sunrise on May Day, you'll stay pale and beautiful all year. You make a mental note. Not because you believe it, but because it sounds gentler than Mercury. A shooting star skims the horizon. You wonder if Lady Idelva would approve. Evening falls in the village, and the lanterns flicker with that familiar honeyed glow. You pass a row of shutters and catch sight of your shadow stretching long across the cobbles. But tonight, you're not worried about your skin. Tonight, the battlefield has shifted north. To your forehead. And your eyebrows. Or rather, their conspicuous absence. You duck into the cottage where that chatty weaver lives, the one who tells fortunes by candle wax and sells love charms when the priest isn't looking. She's halfway through plucking her eyebrows into oblivion, muttering about clean lines and holy expressions. Her brow is smooth, pale, and disturbingly large. You sit across from her, holding a mirror that wobbles like your confidence. In medieval times, eyebrows are under siege. Thin is in. But not arched and glamorous, think erased, subdued, and saint-like. The ideal forehead was vast. A clean dome of thought. Eyebrows? Distracting. Worldly. The kind of thing that could tempt a monk or raise suspicion. You take the tweezers she offers. They look harmless enough until they are not. Pluck. Oh. Again. You make it halfway through one brow before blinking back tears and wondering how anyone did this for love, art, or divine approval. The weaver leans close and tells you a secret. Some women sing prayers while plucking. Others use hot wax made from beeswax and lard to rip out whole rows at once. Some even burn the hairs off with smouldering flax. One noble woman reportedly used fish bones. No one's sure how. Or why. Historians still argue whether this trend began as a religious attempt to emulate the Virgin Mary's depictions, or just because somebody, somewhere, thought it looked good on a tapestry. You pass a church on your way home. High above the altar is a fresco of Saint Cecilia. Her brows are faint wisps, nearly invisible, her forehead a celestial plane. She gazes upward, as if free from earthly burdens. You kind of envy her. Not because she's a saint. Because she doesn't have to do this herself. In the market the next day, you overhear a group of girls talking about that suspicious brow. Apparently, brows that are too thick or too pointed suggest witchcraft. Sharp angles? You're cunning. Arched and high? Probably a seductress. And if they meet in the middle? That's a whole other problem. That's the devil's bridge. Definitely not good. To counteract this, women use everything from lime paste to pumice stones to smooth things out. You spot a merchant selling forehead powder in a little velvet pouch. It smells like chalk and regret. The label says it'll bless the brow and lift the soul. You're 99% sure it's flour. And it's not just the brows, eyelashes get the same treatment. Some women pull them out entirely. Yes, all of them. Why? Because long lashes were thought to indicate lustfulness. And lust is Inconvenient. You try not to cry. It'll ruin the powder. You do, however, try the more subtle trick, wet ash mixed with rosemary to faintly darken what remains of your brows. Just enough to show you could have them if you wanted. Not too tempting, not too plain. That middle ground where beauty whispers instead of shouts. A fringe tale you hear while trading turnips. A woman in Prague reportedly painted fake brows an inch higher than her real ones, then shaved the originals to match. It caused such a stir that the bishop wrote an angry letter. About eyebrows. You try not to laugh too loud. Meanwhile, a monk delivers a sermon about modesty and facial simplicity. Your face is not yours, he says. It is the Lord's. Do not paint it. Do not shape it. Let it be as you were born. Behind him, you spot a nun with faintly smudged kohl near her lash line. She catches your glance and shrugs. Divine exceptions, perhaps. Men aren't immune either. You pass a knight preparing for a joust who's combing his brows with boar bristles. Gotta look fierce, he mutters. His squire just sighs. And still, the message is clear, eyebrows are a statement. A risk. A reflection of your soul, or so everyone seems to believe. That night, you press a warm cloth against your forehead. It's sore. Your brows, what's left of them, are stinging from the day's devotion to beauty. You stare at the ceiling and imagine a world where you could grow them thick and wild, like ivy across a chapel wall. But for now, you'll keep the line thin. Sacred. Invisible. Tomorrow, maybe you'll draw them back on with soot and wine. Just a little. Just enough to say, yes, I see you looking. You awaken to rain tapping gently against the thatch roof, soft and almost musical, like fingers on a lute. But your dreams were strange, faces with long noses, narrow as swords or bulbous as turnips, parading past you in flickering torchlight. Maybe it's a sign. Or maybe it's just your subconscious reacting to last night's stew. You pull on your cloak and venture out, puddles forming beneath your feet, as today you explore something subtle, central, and surprisingly controversial, the medieval nose. You've never really thought about it before, but as you pass the butcher's stall and see a row of townsfolk haggling over tripe and radishes, you notice it, noses everywhere. Hooked, straight, buttoned, flared. And people notice them, too. A nobleman walks by with a perfectly Roman nose, and the baker's wife practically swoons. Sharp as truth itself, she whispers. Turns out, the nose was more than just a face fixture in medieval beauty. It was a character assessment. Long and slender? Intelligent and noble? Small and upturned? Childlike, maybe too playful? Wide and flattened? Possibly foreign, possibly cursed. Or, if you're unlucky, both. In courtly poetry, ladies are praised for noses like towers of ivory. Which sounds pretty sharp. Statuesque, even. You can't help but smirk imagining someone genuinely thrilled by the phrase, her nose cast a mighty shadow. Love sonnets were weird back then. You pass a painter working on a fresco. He's carefully elongating a lady's nose with his brush, smoothing the slope into something impossibly idealized. Too short and she looks like a gossip, he murmurs. Too long and it's just absurd. You ask what he's aiming for. He thinks a moment. Noble, but not witchy. Straight, but not Roman. Heavenly, but also, he pauses, approachable. So basically, facial geometry meets theology. Back at the bathhouse, you hear women trading tips. One presses rose water onto the bridge of her nose to keep the pores polite. Another uses a tiny clamp carved from bone to pinch hers overnight. Just to encourage the right shape, she says, as if noses are wayward vines that need training. One fringe method you hear about? Tying a soft ribbon around the tip of the nose while sleeping. Supposed to lengthen the spirit and the profile. Another woman claims she once saw a nun rubbing honey mixed with crushed emerald on her nose to reduce shine. A holy sparkle, she calls it. You can't confirm any of this works. But hey, if it does, medieval TikTok would have loved it. As for surgical enhancements, those are rare, risky, and mostly whispered about. You overhear a traveling bard sing about a woman who had her nose cut and mended by a Moorish doctor using heated coins. It sounds like a horror story, and possibly a metaphor, but you still wince. Historians still argue whether these surgical rumors were based in reality or just exoticized tales from returning crusaders. What's clear is that noses, like everything else on your face, were a canvas for judgment. Even saints in illuminated manuscripts were depicted with carefully curated nasal symmetry. Crooked noses were usually left to sinners and background characters. At the edge of town, you encounter a nobleman with a pronounced, hawk-like nose. He stands proudly beneath a carved archway, his profile like a coin. He catches you staring and says, "Strong nose, strong blood." Then he sneezes into a silk square and walks away, dignity intact. Later that day, you sit beside the river with a girl your age. She stares into the water, tracing the curve of her nose in the ripples. "Do you think it's too wide?" she asks softly. You shake your head. She smiles faintly. "My mother says wide noses come from working in the sun." She doesn't sound ashamed, but not quite proud either. Just aware. Nearby, a traveling merchant sells painted wooden masks. One has a long nose, regal and arched. Another is soft and buttoned, almost comical. He offers you one to try. "Helps you see how others see you," he says. You pick the regal one and put it on. The world looks exactly the same, but somehow you feel a little taller. Night falls, and you lie on your straw mat, staring upward. You reach up and touch the bridge of your nose. Not tower-like. Not buttoned. Just yours. In this world, that's not always enough. But tonight, maybe it is. You're already awake when the rooster crows, lips dry and cracked from the evening breeze. The coals in the hearth are cold, but your curiosity burns brighter than ever, because today, it's all about lips. Not just any lips, either. Tonight, you're tracing the soft red lines of medieval ideals, rules, and rumors. And let me tell you, things get weird fast. You begin your morning outside the town bakery. As you wait for the first loaf, you notice the baker's wife applying something to her lips, very discreetly. She rubs a crushed mixture of elderberries and sheep fat onto her mouth and presses her lips together like she's sealing a secret. For color, she murmurs, catching your glance. To look lively. And she does, too. Despite the flour in her hair and the ever-present scent of yeast, her lips glow with a muted burgundy that whispers, "I am still here." In medieval Europe, lips were never just lips. They were indicators of virtue, passion, illness, or sin, depending on who you asked and whether or not they liked you. Modest lips were preferred. Small, pale, gently bowed. A rosebud mouth, not too wide, not too full. Too much color, and you might be accused of vanity. Too little, and you risked looking like you'd been hexed by a village goat. Historians still argue whether lip rouge was seen as purely cosmetic or as part of broader medicinal practices. After all, some tonics that stained lips also freshened breath, warded off disease, or calmed female humors, whatever that means. But one thing's clear, cherry red lips, when done subtly, were admired. You make your way through the market and find an apothecary stall, where a young woman is grinding cochineal beetles, tiny crimson creatures imported at great cost, into a thick paste. Mixed with animal fat and beeswax, it becomes a soft lip stain that she sells in walnut shells. One noblewoman swears by it. You don't want them too red, she says, or the priest will notice. Just enough for a holy flush. You raise an eyebrow. She doesn't notice. She's busy checking her reflection in a polished spoon. By mid-morning, you find yourself in the cathedral's shadow. A friar preaches to a small group of townsfolk about the dangers of seductive speech and the mouths that wield it. A silent mouth guards the soul, he says. But a painted mouth tempts the devil. You glance around. Several women cover their mouths with their veils, not in shame, but to hide smiles. One has faint berry pigment staining the edge of her lips. She doesn't look sinful. She looks tired of being told what her face is allowed to say. You sit by a fountain next to a fishmonger who chews cloves between deliveries. Keeps the breath sweet, he explains. Especially on Fridays. The fishy irony is not lost on you. Clove and cinnamon were prized not just for breath, but as courtship aids. If someone smelled vaguely spicy, they probably had plans. Or at least, hopes. A fringe tidbit you overhear from an old woman shelling peas: some women rub their lips with the inside of a boiled onion. Brings color to the mouth, she says. And keeps men away. Two birds, one stinky stone. But not all stories are humorous. In one town, a woman was accused of sorcery for using a lip stain made of crushed nightshade. She claimed it was only for beauty. The villagers didn't care. Her enchanted smile scared them. And so, they chased her out of town with sticks and prayers. You wonder if she found another place to wear her smile in peace. You head to a feast that evening, where the nobility gather in silk and arrogance. The women sip wine with lips just dark enough to notice, but not scandalize. One nobleman leans toward a lady and compliments her mouth, quietly, of course, because open admiration could be interpreted as lust. Her reply is equally delicate: "The Lord gave me lips to speak. I just made them worth listening to." She bites into a figure. The color deepens naturally. You realize she planned that. You admire her even more. There's etiquette to smiling, too. Broad smiles are often seen as unladylike, too loose, too joyful, too inviting. You're supposed to smile with restraint, lips closed, like someone who's happy but still aware of eternal damnation. Teeth should be hidden. Smirks are acceptable. Full-on laughter? Only if you're a jester. Or drunk. Or both. A painter shows you a miniature portrait he's just finished, a noblewoman gazing demurely downward, her lips barely parted. He tells you he added a hint of crushed rose petals to the paint for realism. It worked. You can almost hear her whisper. As you return to your cottage, you try your own version, a dab of crushed raspberry from your meal, mixed with a drop of honey. It stains your mouth gently, not dramatically. You glance at your reflection in the wash basin. You look thoughtful. Which is the goal? In this world, your lips must do more than speak. They must imply, suggest, tease. But only the right kind of teasing. Anything more, and you're one clove away from accusations of witchcraft. You lie down and listen to the wind outside. The taste of raspberry and smoke lingers on your lips. Not too red. Just red enough. It's deep night now, the kind that swallows torches whole. You shuffle through the cloister gardens under a blanket of damp fog, feet silent on the mossy path. Somewhere behind you, a door creaks shut. You don't look back. Not because you're afraid, but because tonight, we're peeking into something more haunting than any shadow, the medieval relationship between beauty and sin. You slip into a quiet chapel, the kind still warm with incense and candle wax. On the far wall, a painting looms. A woman with radiant skin and soft lips stares toward heaven, her hands clasped in prayer, her hair veiled, but her cheeks aglow with unnatural light. At her feet lies a shattered mirror. That's your first clue. See, in the Middle Ages, mirrors weren't just glass and tin. They were symbolic objects. Dangerous, even. A woman staring into a mirror for too long might not be checking her veil, she might be consorting with pride, the deadliest of sins. Beauty, in this world, was a battlefield between purity and temptation, often fought in your own reflection. You settle on a bench near the painting, just as two nuns walk by, whispering about a novice who was caught admiring her face in a spoon. She's been assigned extra prayers. Not for the vanity, exactly, but for the pride it represented. Vanity was seen as the gateway drug to everything else, lust, greed, even wrath. Because if you loved your own face too much, surely you'd do anything to preserve it, or worse, use it. Yet paradoxically, everyone still cared about appearances. The contradiction isn't subtle. Even priests wore jeweled crosses, and bishops draped themselves in silks so fine they made noble women weep. Historians still argue whether this tension stemmed more from theological doctrine or from the slow creep of courtly culture into daily life. Either way, the result was a bizarre double standard. Beauty was a gift from God, but desiring it too openly? That was the devil knocking. You leave the chapel and step into the sacristy, where a priest carefully adjusts the folds of his alb before entering the nave. His ring catches the light, his face powdered ever so slightly to reduce the pulpit shine. You blink. He notices your gaze and offers a crooked smile. A clean face speaks more clearly, he says, as if it's a proverb. You're not sure it is. The next morning, you follow a group of merchants into the town square, where a traveling preacher mounts a barrel and begins to shout. Beware the painted woman, he roars. For her face is not hers, but a mask of sin. A few people nod solemnly. Others roll their eyes. One girl tucks her hood tighter and disappears into the crowd. You later spot her behind a tapestry stall, dabbing a smear of beetroot to her lips using a shard of polished bronze. Her hands shake, not from shame, but from cold. He doesn't have to look at me, she mutters. But I do. That lingers with you for a long while. In a back alley, you encounter a beggar with an odd collection, broken bits of mirror, polished stones, reflective metal scraps. She holds one up to your face and cackles. You're still in there, aren't you? You give her a coin. Maybe two. Back at the manor, a noblewoman shows you her private chamber. Rich tapestries, a gilded comb, a polished mirror from Venice. It's dangerous, she says, touching the glass, but necessary. I must know how I'll be seen. She doesn't seem vain. Just practiced. Later, a friar passes by, muttering to himself. You catch snippets, Narcissus drowned in his own reflection. Beauty without humility is a knife. You're not sure who he's quoting. You're not sure he knows either. One fringe tidbit makes the rounds during the evening meal. A nobleman once ordered all mirrors in his estate covered for Lent. Not just the ones in bedrooms, all of them. Even the spoons. His daughter used the surface of a lake to admire her hair, and he made her sleep in the stables for a week. Devotion? Or drama? Hard to say. There's also talk of beauty as a divine test. One nun insists that true beauty is given to tempt men, and those who resist it are holiest of all. Which seems a bit unfair to beautiful women. like being born a walking quiz. By firelight, a minstrel sings a tale of a maiden whose face was so fair that men fought wars over her. She fled to a convent, disfigured herself with nettles, and was later declared a saint. The crowd claps quietly, some in admiration, some in discomfort. You sit alone by the hearth, staring into a bowl of water. Your reflection flickers, bends, reshapes. You try to see yourself the way they do, pure, sinful, sacred, dangerous. But mostly, you just see someone tired of pretending. You lean back. The coals glow gently. You're not sure if you're vain. But you are aware. And in this age, that might be even worse. Morning light slants through the high windows like golden ribbons, and you're wrapped in 3 layers of wool, linen, and frustration. You can barely move your arms. You can't feel your ears. And somewhere underneath all of this fabric is a neck. Maybe even a jawline. But it's impossible to say for sure. That's because today, you're not just wearing clothes, you're wearing a face frame. In medieval Europe, fashion didn't just drape your body, it shaped how your face was seen, literally. No matter how artfully you plucked your eyebrows, powdered your skin, or stained your lips, the real finishing touch wasn't cosmetic, it was architectural. Headdresses, veils, wimples, gorgets, hoods, coifs, and veiled horned monstrosities that probably interfered with flight paths. You start your morning with a simple linen veil. It clings to your head with quiet obedience, soft and demure. You feel invisible but holy. A woman in the village nods at you in approval. Chaste, she whispers. That might be the first time someone's complimented you by implying you don't exist. But then you walk to the manor and everything changes. Lady Bronwyn is being dressed for court. She's already stunning, pale skin, coal-lined eyes, and those practically non-existent eyebrows, but the pièce de résistance is the towering henning. It's a cone-shaped headdress that looks like someone turned a candle snuffer into a social threat. Silk veils spill from the point like a comet's tail. You stare, mesmerized. This one's moderate, says her maid, tightening the chin band. Her cousin wears one so tall she can't fit through doorways unless she bows. You wonder if that's a metaphor. There's a purpose to all this fuss. A woman's headdress wasn't just fashion, it was a billboard. Married? Your hair's covered. Widowed? Darker fabrics, flatter shapes. Young and noble? Show your forehead, frame your cheeks, and make sure nothing moves when you nod. Your entire head becomes a curated window display. You try one on, a crisp, starched linen wimple that wraps under your chin and up around your head, leaving only your face visible. You look like a decorative soup spoon. But, surprisingly, it's comfortable. Secure. Protective. And once you start layering, add a silk veil over the top, pin in a circlet, maybe a netted caul studded with seed pearls. Suddenly, you're important. Regal. Possibly someone who's been blessed with land, serfs, and the ability to eat soup without judgment. Still, you can't ignore how limiting it all feels. You try turning your head. The veil tugs. You tilt forward. The henning shifts like it's about to launch a crusade. And don't even think about a strong wind. Historians still argue whether these elaborate headpieces were primarily about fashion, morality, or control. On one hand, they amplified the face into a kind of living portrait. On the other, they restricted mobility, field of vision, and, let's be honest, common sense. One scholar compared the tight wimple to a portable confession booth. You wonder if she meant it kindly. But of course, like all things medieval, class played a role. The poor? No time for hennins. A kerchief, Maybe a hood if it's winter. Functional. Unflattering. But very breathable. You meet a farm girl repairing her hair wrap with a darning needle. She doesn't mind. I sweat enough without a silk tent on my head, she laughs. Still, fashion trickles down. In towns, even merchant wives began mimicking noble shapes, simplified versions made from linen and dyed wool. You spot one woman at church with a twisted cloth wrapped like a halo. Not quite a henning, but definitely a statement. People notice. The priest frowns. She beams. One fringe tidbit you overhear during a feast: a lady once sewed bells into the tip of her henning so people would hear her coming. Not for attention, she was blind. The bells let her servants know when she entered a room. Fashion meets function, medieval style. Men had their own face-framing gear, of course: wide hoods, fur-lined hats, elaborate coifs under helmets. But theirs were often symbols of profession or status. Yours are symbols of permission. You're allowed to be seen just so long as the framing is correct. By dusk, you're exhausted. You unpin the veil, unwind the linen, shake loose your hair, what's left of it, and lie down with your scalp still tingling. It's odd. For a world obsessed with your face, it hides most of it. You're allowed a mouth, a nose, and a bit of cheekbone. The rest? Decorated silence. Still, you understand the appeal. The layers offer protection, dignity, a shield of silk and starch between you and the eyes of strangers. But you also miss the wind on your neck. As you drift off, you dream of a world where you wear nothing on your head but your own hair, loose and free. In the dream, people don't stare. They nod and say, "You look comfortable." Imagine that. The morning sun filters through thin cloud cover, casting a soft grey haze over the road as you head toward the outer fields. It's one of those strange moments when the world looks clean, almost gentle, even though you know your boots are about to sink into mud. But today isn't about silks or powder, it's about sweat, sun, and the politics of skin tone in a world that rarely tells the truth with its face. You pass a group of young women kneeling in the earth, pulling weeds between rows of cabbages. Their sleeves are rolled to the elbow, revealing strong arms tanned gold by years in the open air. One of them, a girl with coppery cheeks and calloused hands, glances up and grins. Her teeth are crooked. Her skin glows. She's beautiful, but not in a way any noble would ever admit. Because here, in this medieval reality, tanned equals tainted. Sun-darkened skin means labor, exposure, sweat. It means you don't have servants, you are the servant. Pale skin? That's your ticket to virtue, status, and the illusion of purity. One of the most popular beauty ideals of the time was untouched skin, not just free of freckles or blemishes, but free of the sun's imprint. If your complexion hinted that you spent any meaningful time outdoors, people assumed you were common. Or worse, sinful. And so, women of means did everything they could to stay indoors, under veils, behind drapery, or, if absolutely necessary, under thick parasols. You wander toward the town gate and watch a noble woman pass, shielded by an awning and 2 attendants. Her skin is so pale you're not entirely convinced she has blood. Her cheeks are powdered, her wrists gloved. She doesn't glance at the workers in the field. Historians still argue whether this ideal of whiteness was driven by social hierarchy, religious symbolism, or health concerns. But whatever the cause, it created a deeply layered code, one that still echoes, centuries later, in makeup aisles and beachside insecurities. And it wasn't just women. Men, too, were judged by their skin, though with slightly different rules. Knights returning from campaign were expected to be tanned, but only temporarily, as proof of valor. A permanently sun-darkened merchant, however, might be mistaken for a laborer or foreigner. And foreigners? Let's just say medieval Europe was not known for its nuance. You walk past a merchant's tent where powders are sold by the spoonful. One jar promises to lighten and clarify the skin using crushed bone, chalk, and vinegar. Another boasts crushed lily root and barley water. None of them smell like anything you'd want near your face. Still, a girl next to you buys a pinch, wraps it in cloth, and hurries off. Her hands are tanned, but maybe her cheeks won't be. You hear whispers of more dangerous remedies. One fringe method involves soaking rags in urine, yep, human, and pressing them to the skin to bleach it. Another uses pigeon droppings. And then, of course, there's lead. So much lead. You stop in the market square and listen to a sermon. The priest tells the crowd that fair skin reflects spiritual cleanliness. Angels are white as snow, he says. The blessed carry no shadows. No one challenges him, though a few farmers in the back glance down at their sun-darkened hands. Nearby, a tapestry is being woven. You peek at the pattern, the pale maiden, golden-haired, framed in a garden of lilies. Her skin glows against the rich green of the background. She's clearly meant to be admired, possibly worshipped. You ask the weaver if she's based on a real woman. No, she says. Just the kind people imagine when they pray. At the edge of town, you meet a traveler from southern Spain. Her skin is olive-toned, her scarf bright red. Children gawk. One whispers that she must be a witch or a dancer. She simply smiles, used to it. Beauty, she says, depends on who's doing the looking. That night, by firelight, a friend confesses she tried to scrub her freckles away with vinegar and ash. It burned, but she thought it might make her look more clean. You sit in silence for a while. Then you show her the sunspot on your shoulder. Still here, you say. She laughs. You think about the girl from the cabbage field, her radiant skin and strong hands. She'll never appear on a tapestry. But she could lift a cart. Or sing like a robin. Or outshine any powdered courtier in the right light. Before bed, you catch your reflection in a bucket. Your cheeks are flushed, your nose a bit red from the wind. And yet you look healthy. Alive. You smear a little clay on your forehead anyway. Just in case tomorrow asks for something different. The sun is just cresting over the village rooftops as you lace up your boots, still chewing the last bite of stale oat bread. There's a spring in your step this morning, and not just because the mud's finally drying. Today's walk will take you somewhere unusual in the beauty narrative, the world of medieval men. Yes, tonight it's his turn under the mirror's unforgiving eye, because male beauty standards were very real and very ridiculous. You stroll toward the training yard, where a gaggle of young squires are mock-fighting with wooden swords, all dust and bravado. Their hair is mostly styled into short curls, a popular look for the era, though one lad has clearly spent an extra hour oiling his locks into careful ringlets. Another has tried to trim his beard into a deliberate holy wedge shape, pointed, groomed, a balance of warrior and saint. Men, just like women, are judged first by what's above the shoulders. Broad foreheads, symmetrical faces, and clear skin aren't just considered attractive, they're interpreted as signs of virtue, leadership, even divine favor. You hear one knight joke to another, "The Lord smiles on those with strong jaws." The other chuckles and flexes his chin like it owes him money. In fact, clean skin is prized in a man. Not too pale, he's not supposed to look like he's been hiding in the pantry, but not so sunburned that he resembles a boiled turnip, either. A slight flush from riding? Acceptable. A working man's tan? Risky. A man's face should suggest power with a touch of mystery, like someone who could either read scripture or stab you with the same level of intensity. Body-wise, the ideal isn't the hulking mass you might expect. Sure, knights need strength, but nobility prefers elegance over brawn. Slender waists, long limbs, straight posture. A man should move like a heron, not a bear. Peasants might be stockier from field work, but the court ideal is all about shape and silhouette. You visit a tailor next, where a lord is being fitted for new court garb. The man examines himself in a hand mirror, scrutinizing how the collar frames his throat. Too tight and I look desperate, he mutters. Too loose and I look poor. His boots gleam with beeswax polish. His fingernails are shockingly clean. You don't ask how. Underneath the table, he hides a calf-stretching brace, a contraption of leather straps designed to elongate the leg and slim the ankle. You blink. He shrugs. A knight must stride, not stomp. One fringe tidbit you hear from the cobbler's apprentice: some noblemen have codpieces padded with wool, not just for protection, but to suggest a certain virility. Some are even perfumed. Others are decorative, sewn with silk and metallic thread. One troubadour jokes that if codpieces had gotten any bigger, they'd have required their own seat at the feast. But beauty wasn't just about looks. Scent mattered. Men, especially of the upper crust, carried scented pouches or infused their clothing with herbs. Lavender, rosemary, even crushed cloves sewn into their hats. If a lady swooned when he passed, it wasn't always the poetry, it might have been the clove oil. Hair was another battlefield. Fashionable men curled their locks with heated irons, rubbed in perfumed oils, and wore hats at just the right angle. You see one merchant patting his hair repeatedly as he walks past reflective surfaces. Rain, he mutters, horrified. The natural enemy of elegance. Facial hair trends vary wildly. In some places, beards are a mark of manhood and strength. In others, they are frowned upon as uncouth. You watch one nobleman argue with his valet over trimming his beard into a Franciscan fade. No one knows what that means, but it sounds fashionable and slightly heretical. Historians still argue whether these male beauty practices were born of genuine courtly love ideals, or if they were simply ways to navigate the labyrinth of social status without getting caught wearing last season's tabard. Probably both. When your reputation hangs on how closely you resemble a saintly knight, or at least someone in a stained glass window, you're going to care about hair gel. Back in the village, a carpenter examines his reflection in a bucket of water. He strokes his stubble and considers whether to shave. My wife says I look like a goat, he says. But goats are strong, aren't they? You smile. He's not wrong. Later, in the tavern, a bard sings of a prince with eyes like wet moss and a jaw carved by angels. You look around and notice half the men adjusting their posture. Someone subtly tucks in his gut. Another checks his breath with a finger and a sniff. And while all this seems silly, it also feels human. Under the armor and ego, men want to be seen too, not just feared or followed, but admired. Maybe even loved. That night, you lie in bed, remembering the squire with the oiled curls and the knight who flexed his jaw. You wonder if they go to sleep hoping someone thinks they're beautiful. Or at least symmetrical. The morning fog hangs low and heavy over the village green, curling around rooftops like sleepy breath. As you wander past the well, your eye catches a cluster of women gathered in a circle, some in faded homespun, others in velvet-trimmed gowns that haven't seen dirt in years. A rare sight, these two worlds mingling. And just like that, today's thread begins to unravel, how beauty standards shifted, collided, and blurred between peasants and nobility. You settle near a bench with a loaf of bread in hand, watching as the women chat and trade. One peasant girl holds up a mirror shard to admire a daisy chain she's laid across her brow. Beside her, a noble woman dabs a scented cloth beneath her chin. And for a fleeting moment, their gestures are almost identical. But make no mistake, the beauty gap between classes ran deep. In the medieval world, what passed for beautiful wasn't just about shape, skin, or style, it was about who you were allowed to be. The noble ideal was delicate, ethereal, unattainable. Skin as pale as parchment. Hair coiled and controlled. Fabrics that shimmered without ever touching mud. Meanwhile, peasant beauty was practical, often accidental. Flushed cheeks from labor. Calloused hands softened with lard and lavender when available. It was a different kind of radiance, one born of movement and survival. You head toward the fields where a few peasant girls are working barefoot. One has tied her hair in a ribbon made from old linen. Another uses beet juice for lip tint, same trick as the baron's daughter, though she'd never admit it. You kneel and ask, "Do you think the noble women are prettier?" One girl shrugs. "They don't sweat." "That's something, I suppose." Still, trends leak downward and upward, like ink on parchment. Noble styles eventually filtered into peasant towns, often simplified, often poorly imitated, but always noticed. A peasant might wrap her head in a cloth folded to resemble a henning. A merchant's wife might darken her lashes with soot just as a noble's maid would. And nobility? Well, they borrowed, too. You hear whispers of one duchess who started applying mud mixed with vinegar because she saw a shepherd girl doing it with such confidence. Apparently, it cleared her skin, and now all the noble ladies want it. Historians still argue whether this beauty cross-pollination happened organically or was part of a broader cultural shift. Some suggest it stemmed from the growing influence of middle-class merchants who straddled both worlds, rich enough to mimic nobles, humble enough to remember their roots. At the market, you overhear a merchant's daughter listing what she needs to make her look more courtly: white flour for her face, rosemary oil for her hair, and boots soft enough that they don't squeak on the stone. She wears a homemade necklace of carved bone dyed with berry juice. You've seen nearly the same one on a countess, except hers is gold. You pass a group of lads arguing over who's more attractive, the baron's niece, with her veiled elegance, or the blacksmith's daughter, who once carried a grown man out of a ditch. One boy mutters, "The noble's pretty, but the smith's real." A moment later, he gets smacked with a turnip. No one wins. One fringe tidbit you pick up from an old seamstress: during especially hard winters, noble women would rub their cheeks with snow to achieve a natural flush. Meanwhile, peasant girls were just cold. Beauty through suffering, but for different reasons. And then there's the matter of regional variation. In some parts of Europe, peasant fashion was colorful and elaborate, bolder than noble wardrobes weighed down by rules and modesty. In others, nobility embraced exotic imports, silks from the East, perfumes from Moorish Spain, while peasants relied on herbs and practicality. But even the church got involved in regulating beauty across classes. Certain fabrics and colors were banned for commoners. Makeup was condemned in sermons, especially when it masks the natural state God gave thee. Translation: don't look richer or holier than you are. You walk into a chapel and notice two women kneeling beside each other. One wears fine wool, the other, coarse linen. Both wear similar veils. Both pray with equal devotion. The only visible difference is the glint of rings. You wonder if God notices. That evening, a small festival breaks out in the village square: music, laughter, and the soft clang of mugs. You watch as a noblewoman and a peasant girl dance near the fire. Their hair glints with the same copper shine in the flames. Their cheeks glow the same. For just a moment, beauty isn't classed. It's warm and human and alive. But then the moment fades. The noblewoman is ushered back to her carriage. The peasant girl sweeps up leftover crumbs from the bench. And the invisible line between them redraws itself. You walk home with aching feet and a head full of faces, painted, plain, powdered, and dirt-smudged. They're all beautiful. But some are allowed to be, and others must earn it. You wash your hands in cold water, noticing the scrubbed raw skin, the rough fingertips. In the mirror shard beside your bed, you catch your reflection. It doesn't look noble, but it does look real. The sun sits low as you follow the winding trail to the edge of the woods. This is where the rules start to fray, where superstition leaks into science, and beauty gets experimental. Because tonight, you're stepping into the wild, spicy world of love potions, magical cosmetics, and nature's sketchiest beauty hacks. You approach a crooked little cottage with herbs hanging from the eaves like green chandeliers. The woman inside is neither young nor old, neither noble nor peasant. She's simply known. They call her the Herb Widow, though no one knows if she was ever married. She waves you in with a grin missing 2 teeth and a face dusted with what looks like flour, but probably isn't. On the table before her, mortar and pestle, rose hips, garlic cloves, a jar labeled bat's ash, probably not a metaphor, and something that smells exactly like boiled regret. Looking for love, she croaks. Or just clearer skin. You blink. She winks. Welcome to the secret beauty toolkit of the medieval fringes. You sit as she demonstrates a concoction meant to smooth the skin and invite glances without inspiring sin. The ingredients? Crushed lavender, egg yolk, vinegar, and mud from the churchyard. Holy ground, she assures you. Keeps demons out of your pores. You pretend to believe her. While the noble classes might rely on imported perfumes and pearl powders, the rest of the population gets creative. Plants, roots, ashes, lard, soot, all fair game. You meet one woman who swears by mixing nettle sap with morning dew. Another rubs the inside of a walnut shell across her cheeks. Why? It sharpens the stare, she claims. Okay then. But it's not just cosmetics. Beauty and magic overlap in fascinating, and sometimes terrifying, ways. Want to be more attractive? Carry rosemary under your tongue. Want a man to fall for you? Rub marjoram oil behind your ears. Want to keep your skin clear during full moons? Sleep with a silver spoon beneath your pillow and recite Psalm 23 backward. Historians still argue whether these rituals were believed literally or practiced more like insurance, just in case the moon was watching. You head into the forest with a younger girl, an apprentice of sorts, who teaches you how to gather truth leaf for breath and maiden's root to brighten the eyes. She also casually mentions a poultice made from crushed ants and fennel for reducing under-eye puffiness. You politely decline. Back in town, you see signs of this underground beauty movement everywhere. A basket of thyme hanging outside a door? A signal the woman inside brews herbal cleansers. A lavender bundle over the doorway? Fragrance, sure, but also a ward against aging and envy. That little pouch around the baker's wife's neck? Filled with chamomile and dried rose petals to keep her skin soft while she works near the ovens. One fringe story you overhear in the tavern, a woman used to wash her face in rainwater collected from gravestones. Claimed it made her look beyond worldly. Depending on who you ask, she either became irresistible, or just weird. Hard to tell. And of course, there's love magic. A realm where beauty, desire, and desperation collide. One popular recipe involves mint, apple peel, and a drop of your own blood stirred into wine. Drink it yourself to become desirable. Or offer it, carefully, to someone you wish would stare at you just a little longer. You listen, horrified and fascinated. But it's not all potions and poison. Some of these homemade remedies do work. You try a skin rinse made from boiled elderflower and honey. It smells divine and leaves your face feeling less like sandpaper. You might actually do it again. Still, there's danger in beauty magic. A woman in a nearby village was caught burying a toad beneath a full moon, part of a charm meant to attract faithful affection. The villagers didn't appreciate the effort. They shaved her head and locked her in a grain shed for 3 days. The toad escaped. Unclear if love was ever found. And yet, people keep doing it. Because beauty isn't just about appearance, it's about control, power, influence. Whether through rouge or rosemary, women, and sometimes men, found ways to take some sliver of agency in a world that offered little else. That night, the herb widow offers you a small jar. Inside, a thick grey paste that smells faintly of mint and something fermented. For your face, she says. Not too much. And only on Tuesdays. You nod slowly. You thank her, step out into the night air, and watch mist rise from the forest floor. Somewhere behind you, she hums a tune with no words. Back at your cot, you dab a fingertip of the mystery cream onto your cheek. It tingles. You smile, amused and slightly nervous. Maybe it's nonsense. Maybe it's genius. Either way, your skin's never smelled more mysterious. You wake up coughing. Not violently, just enough to taste the dry sting of soot and straw on your tongue. The fire went out overnight, and now your blanket smells like everything a medieval hearth collects: smoke, sweat, and a bit of whatever was cooked 3 days ago. You sit up and sniff your tunic. OF. Not good. Definitely not court-worthy. Which is perfect, because today's exploration gets right under the nose, into the pungent, spicy, and often downright alarming world of medieval hygiene and scent. Or, more often, the lack thereof. Let's not sugarcoat it, people in this era do not smell like roses. Not unless they've literally rubbed themselves with roses. Bathing is sporadic at best, dangerous at worst, and tied to a laundry list of sins, rumors, and health warnings. A full-body wash? That's a luxury, a health risk, or a crime, depending on who you ask. You trudge to the communal wash house and peek inside. There, a woman rubs a linen cloth soaked in rose water under her arms while her daughter vigorously scrubs her scalp with mint-infused vinegar. A pot nearby steams with dried chamomile and sage. The scent is confusing. Half fragrant, half like someone boiled a salad too long. Scent matters deeply. It's one of the most powerful tools in the medieval beauty arsenal. But perfume, in the sense we understand it, is reserved for the rich and holy. Instead, the average person works with what they've got: herbs, smoke, and creative placement. You pass a baker's apprentice chewing on cloves like candy. Sweetens the breath, he mumbles, grinding a bit of clove dust into his molars. He looks miserable, but his breath smells like Christmas. Not bad for someone elbow-deep in dough all day. Next, a merchant's daughter shows you her secret, a sachet of dried lavender and rosemary sewn into her underdress. Keeps the smell of goats away, she says, adjusting her neckline. Mostly. A friar walks by, holding a posy of thyme up to his face. When you ask, he frowns. It wards off the plague, he says. And Brother Aldrich's onion breath. You can't argue with that logic. Historians still argue whether the average medieval person was truly filthy by our modern standards, or simply differently clean. Some bath more regularly than the stereotypes suggest. Others relied on dry cleaning methods, rubbing cloths with herbal infusions, brushing skin with soft bristles, or just changing their underclothes. Eventually. Maybe. But here's the thing, scent was tied directly to morality. To smell good was to seem virtuous, pure, even heavenly. Bad odor? Proof of sin, laziness, or demonic influence. And if you were a woman? Oh boy! Sweet breath and fragrant skin could mean the difference between a marriage offer and a public shaming. At a noble banquet, you watch women discreetly pop dried fennel seeds into their mouths. It freshens the breath and settles the stomach, important when half the food is doused in questionable sauce. One lady wears a braided necklace of cinnamon bark and dried orange peel. Fashion and fragrance, she says, pleased. You even hear of some noblemen perfuming their gloves and letters. A love note might carry the scent of lavender or rose oil, as if the very parchment were sighing. You find one tucked between pages of a missal, think of me when the wind brings roses. Smooth. And then there's the weirder side of medieval fragrance. One fringe remedy involves rubbing crushed marigold petals onto the soles of the feet to make your sweat smell like spring meadows. Someone else swears by soaking undergarments in wine before drying them over rose petals. Effective? Debatable. Expensive? Oh, yes. The poorest folk turn to smoke. Literally. They burn rosemary, juniper, or dried pine needles in their homes and stand in the fumes, arms outstretched, like someone trying to make friends with a bonfire. It doesn't exactly clean the skin, but it covers up the sour tang of unwashed linen. Mostly. In town, you stumble across a man wearing a necklace made of dried cloves and garlic bulbs. My wife made it, he says proudly. Says it keeps me alive. You're unsure if she means from illness or from her own wrath. And let's not forget the medieval belief in a miasma, bad smells as carriers of disease. People genuinely feared that foul air could kill, so anything fragrant was protective. You spot one child with a pomander, an orb filled with sweet herbs, dangling from her belt like a holy hand grenade. It swings as she skips. Honestly, she smells fantastic. But the best moment comes when you meet a woman at the apothecary, mixing a paste of crushed mint, thyme, and lard. She's applying it to the inside of her elbows and behind her ears. He's coming to dinner, she explains. And I'd rather he notice me, not the cabbage stew. As the sun sets, you find yourself torn between fascination and concern. These people aren't careless. They're trying. Against all odds, mud, poor plumbing, suspect soap, they've made a beauty ritual from whatever they could find in a garden, a kitchen, or the edge of a forest. You sit at your own hearth at night with a sprig of rosemary tucked in your tunic and a bit of lavender crushed between your palms. You smell confused. But better. Not quite heavenly. But definitely not cabbage. You wake to the creak of cartwheels and the clatter of hooves. The air smells like firewood, smoke, and something faintly sweet, maybe honeyed oats. But today, you're not sniffing for perfume. You're adjusting your belt, tighter than usual. Because today, dear listener, we shimmy into the wide, warped, and waist-cinched world of medieval body shapes. Stretch. Bend. Don't breathe too deep. Beauty in the Middle Ages wasn't just painted on your face. It was stitched, padded, bound, and paraded from the neck down. And while modern runway shows have nothing on TikTok, back then, the ideal body type still cycled in trends, just with more wool and a higher risk of heat stroke. You start your morning helping a seamstress in town fit a noblewoman into her new gown. The lady stands, arms raised, as two servants tug a laced bodice tighter and tighter around her waist. "I must look lithe," she mutters, sipping broth through a straw. Sir Baldwin likes a nipped silhouette. Her breath whistles softly between sentences. Waistlines, in this era, aren't just decoration, they're identity. A woman with a narrow middle and rounded hips is seen as fertile, feminine, and well-fed. A man with broad shoulders and a cinched belt? Knightly. Controlled. Not too plump, but definitely not scrawny. You help the seamstress adjust the lady's gown, smoothing the curve where hidden padding shapes her lower half. Yes, padding. Not everyone was blessed with the right hip-to-waist ratio, so clever tailoring filled in the gaps. One recipe for achieving the noble shape involved layering wool pads sewn into a belt, secured under linen skirts, and hoping no one looked too closely. Fashion, where illusion meets mild chafing. Historians still argue whether body standards were as rigid as they appear in art, or whether painters simply exaggerated features to fit symbolic ideals. You know the type, saints with waistlines like hourglasses and hips that could support a cathedral. In real life, it's more complicated. You meet a cook with strong arms and a wide middle who says, "I feed the baron's table. Of course I'm shaped like the bread I bake." She laughs, rubbing flour into her apron. "My husband says I'm built for comfort and winter." Still, pressure persists. In some courtly circles, a woman's waist was measured with ribbon. If it grew by more than a finger's width between feast days, she might get a gentle warning, or a new diet, broth, apples, and decorative chewing. That's when you chew but don't swallow. You nod politely and go eat a whole loaf in secret. And let's not ignore the codpiece. Yes, the notorious cloth bulge. Originally designed to preserve modesty when short tunics became fashionable, the codpiece quickly became a statement piece. Padded, embroidered, and sometimes even shaped like miniature armor, it transformed from functional flap to flamboyant flag. One nobleman allegedly had his lined with fox fur. For comfort? Prestige? Ego? All three, probably. You pass a group of young men preening by a fountain. They wear fitted hose that leave very little to the imagination, their tunics tailored to show off slim hips and muscular calves. Chickens have drumsticks, one of them says, flexing. So do I. You do your best not to laugh. One fringe tidbit you pick up in the tavern, there's a traveling body shaper who sells belts soaked in vinegar and wine. Supposedly, they shrink your waist overnight. You're skeptical. You're also very aware that he smells like fraud and pickles. As evening falls, you watch dancers at a wedding celebration. The bride is petite and pale, corseted so tightly she's only pretending to eat the sweet cakes. The groom, all sharp cheekbones and puffed sleeves, looks like a stylized falcon. But the real joy? The older women clapping along. Sturdy, soft, round. They laugh with their whole bodies, cheeks flushed, veils askew. They don't need a girdle to command attention. And maybe that's the secret. Despite all the pinching and padding, real presence can't be sewn into shape. It's in the way people move, the way they throw back their heads to laugh, or how they carry themselves through the world, lace or no lace. You settle into bed, belly full and ribs comfortably uncompressed. You tug your belt loose and stretch, imagining what life would be like if you never had to fake a figure again. No codpiece. No corset. Just breath. The church bells toll at mid-morning, their echo washing over the village like a reminder that even beauty, even bones and blush, is ultimately under divine jurisdiction. You're walking slowly today, maybe because your legs are sore from yesterday's bodice lacing, or maybe because today's thread is heavier than usual. This isn't about hairpins or rouge. This is about something deeper, how the church shaped the rules of beauty, sometimes with scripture, sometimes with fire. You pass under a stone arch and into a courtyard where a group of novices are scrubbing flagstones. Their heads are bowed, their veils stiff and simple, their faces bare of any paint or adornment. Not ugly, just untouched. One girl glances up at you and smiles. Her face is round and soft, lit with a quiet confidence. You wonder how often she's told that her worth lies not in her looks, but in her soul. Because in medieval Christendom, beauty wasn't just cultural, it was theological. And that's where things get slippery. The Bible never directly tells you to pluck your brows or powder your nose. But medieval sermons? Oh, they'll let you know. Vanity, preaches a friar in the square, is the devil's mirror. A woman who paints her face invites not admiration, but damnation. His voice booms over the heads of passing children, one of whom is still picking at dried berries on her lips. You pause in front of a chapel wall where an illuminated manuscript is on display. A saint gazes upward, her face pale and clear, her expression serene. She wears no jewelry. Her hair is veiled. But something about her feels radiant, like light is coming from within. That, you're told, is inner beauty. The kind that doesn't wash off. The kind the church insists you cultivate through fasting, prayer, and not flirting with the stable boy. Still, contradictions bloom like weeds in the pews. Some saints, particularly female martyrs, are described in texts as extraordinarily beautiful, faces that glowed like the moon, skin whiter than snow. And yet, these same women are praised for rejecting vanity. Which is it, then? Be beautiful? Or be invisible? Historians still argue whether these ideals were created to elevate women or control them. Probably both. Because while outward beauty was sometimes called a gift from God, it came with strings. If you flaunted it, pride. If you concealed it too well, suspicion. There was no winning, just balancing. You wander into a monastery library and thumb through a collection of sermons. One passage warns against painted cheeks and crimsoned lips, comparing them to the false fruit of Eden. Another praises humble modesty in women who wear ash instead of powder. There's even a note in the margin, scrawled by some long-gone monk, that reads, "Vanity fades. Sin clings." Cheerful stuff. Outside, a woman kneels by a well, washing her hands. She dips a cloth into rose water, then hesitates. Is it cleansing, or cosmetic? Devotional, or deceitful? You realize she's not sure either. But don't think this pressure only fell on women. Men, too, were judged by appearance, just differently. A priest with too much oil in his hair might be seen as worldly. A monk with a flush on his cheeks might be accused of breaking fast. One bishop's elegant robe sparked rumors for years. One man simply refused to wash his face lest he scrub away humility. Or, more likely, because it was cold. Back at the convent, the abbess tells you of saints who disfigured themselves to protect their chastity. One rubbed lye into her skin until her face scarred. Another cut off her hair and teeth to become undesirable. These stories were told as triumphs. You feel a twist in your stomach. And then there are relics, bones, veils, hair from holy women, preserved in gilded glass and praised for their divine beauty. You peer at one fragment, a lock of hair, once red gold, now brittle. People bow before it. You head toward the edge of town where a group of young women are rehearsing a play about Saint Agnes. The girl playing her wears no makeup. But she's painted a red circle on her cheek to symbolize temptation. It's symbolic. It's theater. And she knows it'll wash off. The real beauty, she says, is in how Agnes endured. A fringe tidbit from the candle maker's wife, during Lent, Some women scrubbed their faces with ashes not only as penance, but to reduce shine. No vanity in suit, she laughs, lighting a wick. As the sun sets, you return to your cot and stare into the tin mirror. Your face is smudged with dust and clove oil, your hair loose under your veil. You try to see yourself the way a priest might, either as a vessel for grace or a cautionary tale. Then you blink. You just see yourself. Tired. Curious. Very much alive. You blow out the candle and pull the covers over your shoulder. You're not sure if beauty is sin, blessing, or somewhere in between. But tonight, you've earned the right to question it. You're up before dawn again, chasing a rumor whispered between bread stalls yesterday. They're painting her again, Lady Muriel, the one with the swan neck. The voice had dropped to a reverent hush, as if talking about royalty. Or a ghost. You couldn't resist. So here you are, tiptoeing down the narrow corridors of the manor's west wing, dodging servants and laundry baskets, until you reach a chamber flooded with gold morning light. And there she is. Lady Muriel, barely moving, perched like sculpture while the painter dabs at his panel. You lean against the doorway, silent. She isn't smiling. Of course not. Smiling in portraits is reserved for jesters and madwomen. Instead, her lips are faintly parted, her gaze tilted downward, her forehead high, her skin powdered nearly white. You watch the painter work. A brushstroke here, a smudge there. She's being perfected, one deliberate exaggeration at a time. Welcome to the realm of portraits and propaganda, where beauty is frozen, edited, and displayed for eternity. In the medieval world, few people had their likeness captured. Art was expensive. But for the noble and the holy, painted faces weren't just memory, they were message. A kind of social branding, chiseled in oak and egg tempera. You lean in. The painter steps back to compare his work with the real Muriel. Except, they're not identical. Not even close. His lengthened her neck, smoothed her jawline, adjusted the light so her cheekbones glow. She's becoming an icon, not a person. And no one seems to mind. In fact, that's the point. Portraiture in the Middle Ages didn't aim for realism. It aimed for symbolic perfection. A saint was painted as serene and pale because peace and purity were the ideals. A noblewoman's hair might be more golden than it was in life, her waist thinner, her gaze more modest. Godly enhancements, one bishop once called them. Historians still argue whether subjects had input in their depictions, or if they were shaped entirely by artists, patrons, or religious expectations. In most cases, the truth was somewhere in the middle, a negotiation between self-image and public performance. You glance at a stack of sketches nearby are studies of hands, veils, eyes. One features a woman's profile with a nose so delicate it might snap. Another has perfectly arched brows, painted in soot and confidence. None of them look like the tired, fidgeting servants who bring the painter his tools. Later that day, you visit a small church tucked behind the orchard. The stained glass scents above the altar are glowing, impossibly clean. Their faces are nearly identical, wide eyes, pale skin, golden halos. You recognize the style now. It's not about who they were, it's about who they're supposed to remind you of. A few peasants kneel below, praying to these faces of frozen perfection. You wonder how it feels to worship an image more idealized than any real person could ever be. You meet a scribe in the scriptorium later, copying illustrations into a book of hours. He's working on a miniature portrait of a donor, a lady with impossibly white hands, no wrinkles, and eyes like polished marbles. She's 80, he admits. But the Lord prefers his patrons young. At the market square, you see another kind of image, painted signs outside shops, woodcuts nailed to poles, even playing cards with caricatured women, big eyes, tiny mouths, cinched waists. Beauty, once reserved for the chapel or the manor wall, is spilling into the streets, simplified for public consumption. One fringe tidbit? You overhear that a local nobleman once commissioned a portrait of his wife posthumously and insisted the painter make her look less tired. The result was so flawless that when people saw it, they assumed she'd been a saint. She hadn't. She'd once stabbed a steward with a hairpin. Back at the manor, Lady Muriel finally stretches and exhales. The painter bows. She doesn't even look at the panel. She knows what's there. It isn't her, it's her ghost, perfectly preserved. You follow her down the hallway where portraits of her ancestors line the walls. Every woman in every frame looks eerily similar: smooth skin, half-lids, distant expressions. No freckles. No crooked teeth. No laughter. And yet, each one had a voice. A body. A scent. Things no painting could ever hold. As evening falls, you catch your reflection in the window glass. Imperfect, muddy, real. No panel could freeze it. No brush could lie it into holiness. You whisper, "Thank God," and mean it. Night falls like ink spilled across the sky, thick and absolute. Somewhere out in the fields, a barn owl shrieks, but you don't flinch. Tonight, your mind is on danger, not from beasts or blades, but from beauty. Yes, you've seen the powdered faces, the veils, the honey-paste facials. But tonight, you wander deeper, into darker territory. Because in the medieval world, beauty could be a blessing or a curse. One wrong glance, one jealous whisper, and suddenly you're not admired. You're accused. Tonight, you're walking the thin, terrifying line between witch, wanton, or wife. You reach the edge of town where the church shadows the execution square. A few villagers pass you, faces pinched. At the center stands the old stone post, worn smooth where hands have been bound. No one speaks about it openly, but everyone knows more than one woman has stood there, accused of things no ointment or prayer could fix. Because here, too much beauty makes people suspicious. You meet a girl named Elira who used to be admired for her skin, so smooth it seemed to glow. But when the Lord Steward began gifting her ribbons, the steward's wife started asking questions. Elira was accused of enchanting him. Not in the poetry sense. In the spellbook sense. She swears she only wore a bit of lavender water and blushed at compliments. But the steward's wife knew the script. She bewitched him, she told the bishop. Her lips were unnaturally red. That's all it took. Historians still argue whether accusations of witchcraft had more to do with personal feuds or genuine belief in sorcery. Likely both. What's certain is that unusual beauty, or the deliberate performance of it, often made people uncomfortable. A woman who drew too much attention, too effortlessly, was rarely left unchallenged. And sometimes, it wasn't beauty alone, it was beauty out of place. A peasant girl who spoke too well. A merchant's wife who wore her hair too high. A widow who applied cheek stain to look younger. That wasn't style. That was deception. Dangerous deception. You pass the blacksmith's home. His wife was once praised for her long lashes. Then she was seen bathing under a full moon. She said it was to relieve sore muscles. Someone else said she was calling to demons. The truth vanished faster than the wash water. One fringe tale that chills you, or a woman in Brittany used to sell rose petal salve from her cottage window. She had clear skin, soft hair, and always smelled of oranges. One day, she refused a nobleman's offer of marriage. The next week, she was chained and interrogated for feminine sorcery. They said her creams contained crushed bones. No bones were found, but her cottage was burned anyway. You reach the village square where a crowd gathers around a storyteller. He's weaving the tale of a wife who tamed a bear with her gaze. She must have been a witch, someone says. Or just knew what bears liked, someone else jokes. Nervous laughter follows. Not everyone's sure which is safer. In this world, a woman's beauty was supposed to be controlled, owned, displayed, and explained. If she used it for herself, that was suspect. If she seemed too confident, she was bold. If she turned men's heads without trying, well, she must have done something unnatural. You wander into a convent garden at dusk. A nun is pruning herbs, her hand stained with marjoram and earth. "We don't paint our faces," she says calmly, not looking at you. "But we still want to be seen." You ask her why that's dangerous. She simply replies, "Because people hate what they can't name." You pause. Because that's it, isn't it? Beauty in this world has to come with a role. Wife, modest, veiled, devoted. Wanton, uncovered, alluring, doomed. Witch, mysterious, powerful, unforgivable. But what if a woman is all three? Or none? What if she's just there? Beautiful on her own terms? That's when the trouble starts. As the moon rises, you return to your cot and light a candle. Your reflection in the tin mirror is uneven, shadowed. You dab a little ash on your cheek, just enough to look plain. Safe. Just in case. You blow out the light. The night is silent. But the fear lingers. The morning is warmer than usual, and the scent of cinnamon and roasting dates drifts through the market square. There's a hum in the air, a subtle shift. Traders have arrived from far-off cities with textiles, spices, and stories. Today, beauty takes you beyond hedgerows and holy wells. Today, you travel not by foot but by comparison. Because this chapter is about East meeting West and how medieval beauty standards weren't just local, they were a swirl of influences, complements, and quiet rivalry. You find yourself trailing behind a caravan just entering the town gates. Their robes are brighter, their sandals quieter, and their skin kissed by a different sun. The merchant at the front wears kohl around his eyes, not for drama, but for health, he says. It shields against sun and sand. But it does look striking. More defined. You're jealous. You duck into the side market where silks from Byzantium shimmer like spilled water and tiny jars of musk and myrrh line the stalls. A noble woman reaches past you to purchase rose oil from a Moorish trader. She doesn't look at you, but she does copy the way he applied it to her pulse points. Beauty, it seems, knows no border. In medieval Europe, beauty is tightly wound with virtue, modesty, and social status. But as trade routes opened and travelers moved between continents, people couldn't help but notice the differences and borrow them. In Islamic courts, beauty leaned into luxury. Smooth skin, lined eyes, perfumed hair. Poetry praised every detail, from the arch of a brow to the softness of a heel. You hear one merchant quote a verse, her eyes hold dusk, her lips the call to prayer. You melt a little. Then remember you're supposed to be objective. Historians still argue how much European beauty culture was influenced by its contact with Islamic, Byzantine, and Eastern traditions. But in the faces of the people around you, in the scent of ambergris in the air, in the rise of eyeliner even among monks, you see the fingerprints of something broader. Byzantine women, too, had their own rules. Pale skin was prized, but with blush, applied deliberately, often with crushed pomegranate. Gold thread braided into hair. Nails tinted with henna. There was a reverence for the jewel-like shimmer of skin, as if the body itself were sacred decoration. You meet a woman from Constantinople at the bathhouse. She offers you a small bar of soap scented with fig and basil. "We wash daily," she says softly. "Cleanliness is part of faith." You glance down at your arms, still vaguely dust-colored from yesterday's hike. You nod like you already knew that. One fringe tidbit you overhear at a tavern: a European countess once tried to replicate an Egyptian perfume recipe using cloves, oil, and orange blossom. She ended up causing a rash that spread halfway across her face. The recipe was real, but the proportions were not. There's jealousy, of course. Some European nobles whisper that the Eastern women are too painted, too bold, or too vain. But then they quietly ask where to get the black powder for their lashes. Influence rarely asks permission. You pass a scribe copying a manuscript in Greek. On the margin is a sketch of a woman with elaborate earrings, hair piled in curls, and outlined lips. From a Persian court poem, he tells you. Their queens wore cosmetics and armor. Sometimes at the same time. You stare at the drawing for a long moment. She looks fierce. And beautiful. Later, in the monastery garden, you hear a nun complaining about how the younger girls have started tracing their eyes with charcoal. Like those foreign merchants, she scowls. It's unholy. Another nun mutters, but it's effective. Silence follows. At sunset, the traders begin packing up. You help carry a crate and are rewarded with a tiny glass vial of saffron-infused salve. For your lips, the merchant says with a wink. Or your conscience. That night, you sit under a window watching the stars, those same stars seen from Damascus, Cairo, Rome, and Paris. You smear a bit of the salve on your mouth. It's sweet. Earthy. Foreign and familiar at once. Beauty, you realize, was never just yours. Or theirs. It was always a blend. A conversation whispered between cities and sewn into every veil, oil and gaze. Not stolen. Shared. The wind changes. You feel it before you see anything, a faint chill, a sour tang in the air, like smoke and rot. The town is too quiet. You see shuttered windows, crosses chalked on doorways, bundles of herbs dangling like talismans. You know what this means. The plague has come. But strangely, not everything has stopped. At the edge of the square, a woman adjusts her veil in a cracked mirror. Her fingers tremble. Her skin is pale, too pale, but powdered nonetheless. Her lips shine faintly with wine-stained balm. It hits you, even in a time of mass death, the beauty rituals continue. Maybe because they must. Tonight, we walk through fire, the Black Death, and the strange persistence of beauty amid disaster. You cover your mouth with a scrap of cloth soaked in vinegar and rosewater, protection, or at least the illusion of it. As you pass through the streets, you notice the contrast, decay and desperation side by side with vanity. A young noblewoman is being fitted for a new wimple, even as her mother lies ill in the room behind her. A man carefully shaves his beard into a cleaner line to look less frightened, he says. Because when chaos reigns, appearance becomes armor. The Black Death swept through Europe in waves beginning in the late 1340s, killing an estimated 1/3 of the population. And yet, beauty didn't vanish. It twisted, adapted, persisted like ivy climbing up the side of a crumbling wall. You step into a modest apothecary, where herbs hang like prayers from every beam. A girl about your age is mixing crushed violet petals into a salve, dabbing it onto her cheeks. They say if you look healthy, death might pass you by, she whispers. And if not, at least you'll leave a pretty corpse. Dark humor, but not untrue. Historians still argue how deeply the plague altered perceptions of beauty. Some suggest a pivot toward extreme modesty and spiritual detachment. Others say the opposite, that death's constant presence fueled a frenzied celebration of pleasure, fashion, and physical allure. The truth? Probably both. Depends on who survived. You walk through a makeshift market. Perfumed gloves are being sold, not for courtship, but as plague protection. The scent repels the bad air, the vendor insists. He wears a pomander around his neck, tiny metal cage stuffed with cloves, cinnamon, and dried flowers. Even the death doctors wear them. You pass one such physician, cloaked in black, beaked mask looming like a crow. The nose of the mask is stuffed with herbs to filter the air. It looks terrifying. It smells incredible. And people? They start applying scent the way others wear armor. A girl tucks mint into her sleeves. A boy rubs lavender on his boots. One woman smears rosemary oil beneath her nose to keep from smelling her husband's fever. It's part health, part hope, part denial. Then there's the color. Mourning clothes flood the streets, deep blacks, grays, brown. But now and then, you spot flashes of red or gold. You hear that in Venice, some women still wore crimson silk during outbreaks. If I die, one said, let it be dressed. One fringe story you hear from a traveling peddler, in Avignon, a beauty potion was sold during the plague years that claimed to prevent infection. It included vinegar, sage, wormwood, and a secret ingredient, allegedly a powdered sapphire. People paid fortunes. Most still died. The seller disappeared. You sit on the stone steps near the empty fountain. A woman beside you gently paints her lips with beet juice. Her hands shake. They say red lips confuse the spirits, she murmurs. Make you look too alive to take. You don't ask where she heard that. You just nod. Back at the manor, Lady Muriel has locked herself in her solar. You hear the maids talk, she hasn't left in days, but the mirror near her window is still fogged with her breath each morning. She hasn't stopped brushing her hair. You understand now. When you can't control the plague, you control what you can, your face, your scent, your silhouette. You sleep that night with a sprig of thyme tucked under your pillow, the scent warm and green. Your cheek still carries a faint smudge of berry tint, left from earlier. You didn't wipe it off. Because if death's at the door, you'll answer it in your best. You wake to the clink of coins and the hushed rustle of silk, the kind of sound that means something precious is being traded, quietly. You creep out of bed and follow the noise into the back courtyard, where a maid is crouched behind a barrel, applying a dab of rouge to her cheeks from a tiny glass vial. Her hands move quickly, practiced, and a little afraid. She isn't supposed to have that. Because tonight, we peel back the layers of powder, price tags, and pretense to reveal something that never shows up in the official tapestries, how cosmetics in medieval times weren't just about beauty, they were battlegrounds in the war of class. The maid tucks the vial back into her apron as a voice calls from inside. She scurries off, her cheeks now flushed in that way the nobility likes to pretend is natural. You wait a beat, then pick up what she left behind, a corked pot of crushed mulberries in goose fat. Expensive. Smells like rebellion. In this world, access to beauty products is a privilege and a threat. Noble women have it, flaunt it, carefully, and swear they don't use it. Peasant women improvise, adapt, and risk being punished if they're caught dressing above their station. You make your way to the market, where vendors hawk face powders behind baskets of onions. A pot of pale lead-based cream costs more than a servant makes in a week. Yet somehow, these products find their way into the kitchens, washrooms, and hidden corners of even the poorest homes. Historians still argue whether cosmetics were truly banned for the lower classes or just socially discouraged. But one thing is clear: makeup becomes political the moment someone uses it to cross a line. You pass a merchant's daughter who's cleverly tinted her lips with boiled beetroot and lined her eyes with ash. She looks almost noble until you notice the smudge on her sleeve and the frayed edge of her bodice. Her beauty is real, but it's borrowed. And everyone knows it. You overhear two noble women at the bathhouse scoffing about that baker's wife trying to rouge like royalty. One sniffs, "She doesn't even know to powder before stain." The other replies, "It's dangerous, really. What if someone mistakes her for someone she's not?" You want to shout, "Isn't that the point?" Later, a traveling apothecary opens a basket of forbidden wares: saffron paste, pearl dust, imported oils, even dried whale vomit, ambergris, used as a fixative for scent. You watch from the shadows as a veiled noblewoman buys discreetly, handing over a ring instead of coin. Moments later, a washerwoman offers him a loaf of bread for a smear of rose balm. He refuses. In one corner of the town, a chapel issues new guidelines: women of the lower orders should not wear items of false beauty, lest they deceive others or dishonor their station. Yet on Sunday, you spot the preacher's niece with perfectly pink cheeks and eyes rimmed in something definitely not natural. No one says a word. The truth is, cosmetics blur boundaries. They allow a servant to look like a lady, a merchant's son to appear knightly, a widow to look like someone who still has options. And that kind of illusion? That threatens the whole system. One fringe tidbit you hear from the butcher's wife: a law in Florence once banned common women from wearing pearls in their hair unless they were part of a theatrical production. So, she became a street performer. Sang one song, very badly. Wore pearls anyway. Got away with it. You admire her immensely. As evening falls, you join a small gathering in the manor kitchen. The maids are passing around a single pot of rouge, each taking a turn, carefully dabbing and blending. They giggle, compliment, critique. One girl uses beet juice for her lips and soot for her lashes. "We look like ladies," she says. But there's an edge in her voice. Not pride. Not mischief. Something harder. Something that says, "We know this won't change our lives, but maybe it changes how we survive them." You catch yourself in a reflection, cheeks tinted, eyes bright. For a moment, you could be anyone. Not peasant, not pilgrim. Just someone with color in her face. And that's the power, isn't it? Cosmetics in this world aren't just vanity. They're resistance. Camouflage. A currency with no fixed value, only risk. Paint your lips, and someone may love you. Powder your face, and someone might arrest you. Or worse, ignore you altogether. You sleep that night with a faint trace of rose balm on your skin, gifted from a friend who whispered, "Hide it under the mattress." You do. And dream of a world where you don't have to. The fire crackles low as you wake, chilled and stiff. You roll your shoulders and rub at the sleep lines etched into your cheek, lines that feel deeper than yesterday. You squint at your reflection in a metal pitcher. There it is, the tiniest silver thread in your hair. You tug it free. It resists. Welcome to the unwelcome reality of aging in a world obsessed with looking untouched. Tonight, we lean into the creaking bones and crow's feet of medieval beauty culture, and how growing older didn't just mean more candles on your feast cake. It meant fading status, suspicion, and sometimes, complete invisibility. You shuffle into town with a scarf over your head, not for warmth, but to soften the sun's honesty. Already you feel I skim past you. You're no longer a blushing maiden or fertile bride. You're not quite crone, but you're on the ramp. In medieval society, a woman's beauty was often defined by her youth. Smooth skin, plump cheeks, thick hair. Those qualities symbolized health, virtue, and potential. And when they began to fade, so did public interest. So did power. Unless you pivoted, you reach the market square and find an older woman selling herbal salves from a wooden cart. Her fingers are gnarled but graceful. Her hair is streaked with silver, plaited in a thick braid. She's laughing, loudly, and without shame. She beckons you closer and presses a jar into your hand. For the lines around your eyes, she winks. Though you've earned every one. You like her instantly. She lists off the ingredients: marigold, sheep's tallow, and a touch of thyme. Brightens the face. Softens the truth. Her voice is warm, but there's steel underneath. She knows her audience. She knows the stakes. You ask what happens when a woman no longer fits the mold of beautiful. Her answer: she becomes either invisible or very, very loud. Historians still argue whether aging women were respected as wise matriarchs or quietly pushed aside. In truth, both happened, depending on who you were and how you wielded your years. Noble women might retreat into convents, where age could translate into spiritual authority. Peasant women? They often just worked until their backs gave out, their beauty replaced by labor, their voices hoarse from shouting at chickens and grandchildren. But some fought back with ointments, prayers, and pure defiance. You pass a manor chamber where Lady Muriel, older now than in her portraits, is surrounded by candles and mirrors. A maid carefully plucks grey hairs from her temples with tweezers, her expression unreadable. Muriel's face is powdered, but her hands, veined and wrinkled, betray her age. She notices your gaze. Age, she says, isn't ugly. It's just inconvenient. You nod, but you also see how tightly her bodice is cinched. The illusion matters. Later that day, you stumble across a traveling peddler hawking eternal youth powder. It smells like crushed bones and deceit. He claims it was gifted to him by a desert mystic. Someone throws a turnip at him. You buy a jar anyway, just in case. At the bathhouse, you meet a widow scrubbing her face raw with a rosemary clay paste. It lifts the cheeks, she says. You don't see a difference, but you compliment her anyway. She beams. You hear a fringe tale from a wool dyer. A woman in Italy once soaked her face in red wine every morning to refresh the blood beneath the skin. She reportedly looked 20 at 40. Or 40 at 20, it's unclear. Either way, she died smelling like a vineyard. You walk past a group of young girls plucking their brows and giggling over cracked mirrors. One of them points at you and says, "Do you think I'll look like her when I'm old?" The others shrug. You keep walking. Because you will. And that's the terrifying and beautiful truth. You end your night in the apothecary's shop, turning over vials of elderflower oil and dried fig balm. You ask the old woman behind the counter what she recommends for sagging cheeks. She gives you a jar and a look. What you need, she says, isn't in a jar. She's not wrong. As you settle into your cot, you feel the weight of every year, are not heavy, just present. You press the balm to your temples. It smells of lavender and closure. Aging here is no crime. But it is an art. The kind that doesn't get painted. Only lived. The sky is pale with early light, a soft pastel sweep over the horizon as you make your way through the slumbering village one last time. No errands today. No concoctions. Just a quiet walk with your thoughts trailing behind like a veil in the wind. Because now, with everything you've seen, every powdered cheek and plucked brow, every forbidden rouge and whispered spell, it's time to ask the hardest question of all. Where does it all lead? You pass a window with a mirror propped against the sill. In the reflection, your face. Not saintly. Not scandalous. Just yours. A little tired. A little tender. And suddenly, you realize this isn't just a history of beauty, it's a history of control. Of identity. Of survival disguised as self-expression. The noblewoman with her pearl-dusted lips. The farm girl rubbing mud on her arms to soften them. The monk combing his beard while preaching humility. The girl in the veil, the one hiding her rouge like it's contraband. And the boy flexing his calves beside the fountain. They all shared one truth: how you looked was never really about you. Beauty was a language. And not everyone got to speak freely. You see it now, in the tapestries that made saints glow but erased their scars. In the portraits that slimmed waists and widened eyes. In the sermons, the scandals, the subtle snubs. Your face wasn't just a face. It was a statement. A shield. A target. A map others used to locate your worth. Historians still argue whether these standards were imposed from above or grown from below, passed on by mothers and midwives, whispered between veils. But you know the truth. It was both. Even now, as you step past the chapel doors and into the shadow of the convent wall, you recognize pieces of their world in your own. The blush that says "I'm awake." The mirror angle just right. The fear of not being enough without a filter. Or too much with one. And yet, somehow, you carry them all with you. The nun who dabbed her face with rosewater but never admitted it. The apothecary who sold dew potions to both duchesses and chambermaids. The girl who scrubbed freckles until her cheeks bled. The old widow who wore balm not for beauty, but for memory. And yes, even Lady Muriel, still brushing her hair in front of a mirror long after anyone's watching. They didn't all survive their stories. But they told them anyway. You climb the hill one final time. Below you, the village wakes. Smoke curls from hearths, roosters strut, and someone somewhere is whispering about the new merchant's wife and how she wears her hair like a Moor. The gossip never stops. Neither does the mirror. You breathe in deeply. You smile, not wide, but honest. You know, now, that medieval beauty wasn't just about who looked good. It was about who got to look at all. And it still is. So now, as the lanterns burn low and your thoughts slow to a gentle drift, let's ease out of the castle corridors and cobbled streets. Let the veils fall away, the bodices loosen, the rouge fade into warm memory. You've wandered through centuries of blush and braids, powders and potions, rules scribbled in the margins of psalters and painted on the walls of silent chapels. You've seen beauty praised and punished, faked and feared, whispered about behind fans and shouted from pulpits. And yet, the women and men you met, they still live in echoes. In the way we glance at a mirror. In the way we compare. Adjust. Hide. Shine. They didn't disappear. They evolved. They became us. So now, as your eyes flutter heavier with each passing moment, I want you to let the judgments go. Release the pressure to be flawless, the weight of all the shoulds and should nots. Let it all slip away like a discarded wimple on a spring afternoon. Breathe. Picture yourself walking alone across a moonlit field, barefoot, the grass cool under your toes. You carry nothing but the scent of rosemary and a small mirror tucked in your sleeve, not for vanity, but as a keepsake. You stop beneath an old willow tree, look up at the stars, and for the first time tonight, you feel no need to perform. You are enough. You always were. No rouge. No ribbon. no relic. Just breath. Just warmth. Just the soft, quiet miracle of being here, now, and deeply, unmistakably you. Let the night cradle you like silk. Let the wind hum lullabies through the shutters. Let your dreams be filled with crooked smiles and wildflowers tucked behind ears. You are not in a painting. You are not a sermon. You are not a silhouette shaped to please the crowd. You are a story, unfinished, unrushed, utterly true. Sleep well, wanderer. Tomorrow can wait.